Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. The fit for this video is Lobo. Let's take a look at a comment I got on my last video. It says, that verse says both people committed an abomination. Can you clarify why the party who is taking the masculine role is being punished? So my previous video was on how we translate the word arsenokete, which occurs in 1 Corinthians 6:9. And this is a reference to Leviticus 20, verse 13. And there are three things we need to understand in order to understand what's going on here. The first is that they understood sexuality very differently in the ancient world. Sex was not an activity that two equal partners engaged in mutually. Sex was something that an active sexual agent did to a passive sexual object who was lower than them on a socially conventionalized hierarchy of domination. So when we look at Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20, both are listing the same activities, and they're all mentioning a man who lies with, a man who takes, or something like that. And always the sexual object is someone lower down than them on that hierarchy of domination. There's only one inappropriate sexual activity that is listed that has the woman in the role of the active sexual agent, and that is the only kind of sexual encounter where the sexual object could be lower than the woman on that hierarchy of domination. And that's where it prohibits a woman from lying with an animal. So this is about social hierarchies of domination where sexual agency always flows downhill. And one of the problems with male same-sex intercourse is that that violates that. Because the man who is supposed to be at the pinnacle of that sexual hierarchy, is supposed to be the active sexual agent, is being put in the position of the passive sexual object in that sexual activity. And that's why it was considered an abomination. Now, the second thing you need to understand is why the authors of Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20 considered these sexual indiscretions so bad. Both chapters treat the problem as the same. These sexual encounters are inappropriate. They're violations of sexual expectations related to that hierarchy of domination and to other kinds of social compartmentalizations. And that generates a kind of metaphysical contamination that spills out onto the land and pollutes the land. And if that pollutant reaches a critical mass, then the land can no longer take the presence of that people, and it will vomit them out. Both Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20 refer to that idea of the land vomiting the people out. That's what happened to the nations that were there before. Because they did those things, you don't do those things, so the land doesn't vomit you out. So the idea is that these sexual actions result in the production of this contamination. Leviticus 18 says anyone who does these abominations will be cut off from the people. So we've got a single punishment affixed collectively to all of those sexual indiscretions. Chapter 20 is written by a later author or group of authors who are taking a more extremist position. Because what they do is copy the same crimes that are listed in Leviticus 18, and then they alter things a bit. To begin with, the descriptions of the crimes follow after the pattern in Leviticus 18, where they mention the man who lies with or the man who takes. But then they awkwardly shift to the plural to condemn both parties, because they are both a party to the production of this metaphysical contamination, and so they both bear the guilt. But then they change the punishment. Remember, Leviticus 18 says they will be cut off. That is the collective punishment that applies to everything. Leviticus 20 itemizes everything. Some of them get the death penalty. Some of them will be cut off. Some of them it just says they will bear their guilt, which isn't an actual penalty. Some of them it says they will be childless or they will die childless. But in all of them, it applies to both parties because both people were a party to the production of this metaphysical contamination. And the agency of the passive sexual object is not relevant. And we can see that in the fact that even in the case of the woman who lies with the animal is killed as well, who cannot possibly consent, whose agency could not possibly be relevant or be salient. And so what we have here are two attempts to try to account for the production of this metaphysical contamination and try to prevent it. One account just says, don't do any of these things. Anybody who does these things will be cut off. The other goes further and says, no, we're going to assign individual penalties. And by the way, both parties must receive the same penalty in each and every case. None of these conceptual frameworks have absolutely any relevance or any circulation today. They are based on unscientific, outdated, and bigoted notions of how human sexuality works. They are utterly irrelevant to today.